Starting our season off, we've got Adam Milnor with the National Forest Service, who has been working on the trail plan for the Catalinas and the National Forest that's close to us. And we've got several people that have been involved in providing comments to the Forest Service and to him over the last year in creating the plan, and he's going to share with you what the plan looks like going forward. Adam?
Yes, hi, can you all hear me? All right. Applause at the front end, I'll take it. Thank you, Bruce, thanks for having me. It's great to have the opportunity to come share some of the work that we've been doing. So I'll introduce myself first and describe a little bit about the Forest Service. I have a good chunk of time, so I'm going to avoid my normal habit of rushing through these things. So my name is Adam Milnor. I work for the Coronado National Forest. That's part of the U.S. Forest Service. The National Forest System is a wonderful, wonderful thing spread across the United States. Second largest, you don't have to know all the different agencies. There's the Park Service and the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. If there's trees and it's public land, the odds are mostly it's the U.S. Forest Service. And so my job at the Coronado National Forest is I oversee a number of programs, including recreation, trails, wilderness, all of our visitor centers. I oversee our what's called special uses, which is permitting for things like observatories and power lines and Catalina State Parks, and recreation cabins. I also oversee our Heritage Archaeology Department, and our lands access and lands acquisition program. So I serve a few different roles at the Forest Service. I work at the office in downtown Tucson. If you're not familiar with the spread of the Coronado National Forest, it's quite a vast thing indeed. It's 1.7 million acres that stretches from essentially your backyard here all the way over to New Mexico. So the area is included in the Coronado National Forest. It's basically broken up into 15 different units. The Catalinas, the Santa Ritas where Madera Canyon is, the Chiricahuas, Mount Graham, Cochise Stronghold, the Tumacacri Mountains, all those areas are part of the Coronado National Forest. We're broken up into 5 ranger districts. That area is actually larger than all of the designated national parks in Arizona combined. It is a significant system and a significant asset to us in this part of the world. It has nearly 1,200 miles of trails, 8 designated wilderness areas, and welcomes about 2.5 or 3 million visitors every year. So it's a wonderful place. We're going to focus. I could tell you about things all over that beautiful place, which I've got some favorites, but the hometown favorite, of course, is the Santa Catalinas. And so what we're going to talk about today is a plan, a 15-year plan to improve and enhance the trail system and access to the recreational trail system in the Santa Catalina Mountains. Okay. So briefly, this is the mission of the Forest Service. It's essentially all about balance, sustaining the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. So we have multiple uses. National forests are typically managed for conservation rather than pure preservation. For example, there are other uses on national forests that you might be aware of. We have grazing, we have timber harvest, we have a variety of things, but recreation is really the predominant way that people experience their national forests. And maybe I say that because I'm biased because I'm the recreation guy. Okay, and it's a world-class system of trails. If you're a hiker, I would imagine you have hiked on another national forest in the United States. There are nearly 159,000 miles of trails on national forests in the United States. It is almost without argument the most impressive system of recreational trails in the world. 84 million people use them annually. Just some other cool examples of them, because I get excited about other places. The Bob Marshall Wilderness. Anybody been to the Bob Marshall Wilderness before? That's not a bad place. The High Sierras. Anybody hiked in the High Sierras before? Outside of Yosemite and Kings Canyon, Sequoia, all that is national forests. I was just here last week for my 10-year anniversary. Anybody know where this is in Arizona? Yeah? The West Fork of Oak Creek Canyon. That's on the Coconino National Forest, which if the description of the Coronado sounded big, the Coconino goes basically from the ends of the earth to the ends of the earth, as far as I can tell. Okay, so that's just some context. And I would say overall, part of the context of the Santa Catalina Trail Plan, as we'll discuss, is that you might imagine it's very difficult to take care of 159,000 miles of trail, especially when sometimes the forest burns, or you have different uses that are changing all the time, and mountain bikes come along, or trail runners, or e-bikes. There's a lot of pressure on the trail system in the United States, and the Forest Service, frankly, has had a difficult time keeping up with those demands. We have to do a lot of other things. And so the Forest Service has a national strategy to try to essentially tackle this enormous challenge. And I would say this trail system is also very significant for, you all look like very healthy people. The hiking club is just, I mean, the things that hiking and trail use do for health and wellness, I mean, alone would justify the use of the trail system. But it's incredibly important for a lot of the economies of small communities or even larger communities like Tucson. I mean, a huge proportion of people who come to Tucson come to enjoy hiking in the outdoors, right? So we have to take care of this amazing asset. We're challenged to do so. And so I would view the Santa Catalina Trail Plan as in the context of a larger effort. Okay, we have a lot of people who want to use trails. We're having a difficult time taking care of them in light of all these challenges. What do we do about that? How do we solve that little puzzle? So that's a quick summary of this. And really the point of the trail plan is that we are trying to develop a system of trails and ways to get there. Trails aren't so good if you can't drive to the trailhead or hike to the trailhead. We want to make sure that they're economically, ecologically, and socially sustainable. Kind of the triangle of sustainability you may have heard of. I made the point about how many visitors to Tucson. Over 70% of the people who visit the Coronado National Forest use trails during their visit, so it's the top asset. Hiking is the overall top activity. The place is growing, well documented that during the COVID pandemic, lots of folks discovered the outdoors. We're seeing some small lasting increase in recreation use, all those different activities I mentioned. And of course, in your backyard, we had the Bighorn fire, right? Maybe it doesn't seem so long ago. It doesn't seem very long ago to me, but that had a significant effect on the trail system, right? So out of the 250 miles or so in the Santa Catalina Mountains, it affected 175 miles of those. So the wildfire had a significant effect. And so all these things sort of joined together, and for many years, a number of groups had been sort of lobbying the Forest Service, maybe for specific projects, or I want you to build this trail over here, to this thing over here. And the Forest Service's response generally is, we need a holistic, comprehensive look at that. And in the midst of all the other things we have going on, it was difficult to get around to that, but I think honestly the Bighorn fire was a little kind of kick in the rear to get us going to assess the system and to decide what to do with it. So what is the trail plan? The trail plan is a 15-year framework for prioritizing what we're going to do. It's aspirational. This isn't like a comprehensive plan for a city or municipality that everyone must adhere to. This is a shared vision for the trail system between the Forest Service and our partners. The trail plan, which is available online to view, it's like 90 pages. I didn't print off a bunch of copies. And when Bruce said you can connect to the TV by Bluetooth, I assumed this is a pretty connected audience here, so I assume you'll go to the web and look that up. But the trails in this plan are conceptual, meaning it's a trail from A to B. We generally know that it can go there, but the very specifics of exactly where it will go come in phases, right? Where is that exact trail? Is it going to go around this boulder or that tree? That sort of happens at a future phase that I'll discuss. And then it was driven by public comment and partner collaboration. It was good to hear that some Saddlebrook Hiking Club members participated in the event. I sort of focused my presentation on the end product of the thing rather than the making of the thing. But if you have questions about the making of the thing, I'm happy to share that with you. We really front-loaded listening to people. So what we did is we created a map that people could either email us comments or submit comments on this map and respond to one another about those comments. And we asked them, what do you like? What's working well? What's broken? What do you see opportunities for? Essentially in those 4 categories. And we got 3,000 pieces of feedback from the community. And it was actually quite respectful. It was wonderful. Sometimes you have to moderate those forums. I don't think there was like 2 comments out of 3,000 that were even That's pretty good. Kind of buoyed my faith in humanity, to be honest. So we use that information to drive kind of our initial assessment of what's going on. And then we had a series of focus groups with hikers and with mountain bikers and equestrians. I would say it's a hiking club here, so I got to give credit. I don't know if anyone knows Jim Turlip, but I will give Jim Turlip as the access coordinator for the Southern Arizona Hiking Club, and took it upon himself to translate the wishes of at least the Southern Arizona Hiking Club and distill them into very usable content for the Forest Service. Similar roles were had in the equestrian community and elsewhere, so that was wonderful. And we really tried to drive this in a collaborative way because, as you'll see, we sort of need people's help. And if we're doing this together, we have an obligation to listen. And I will say that worked out pretty good. Okay, so 3,000 pieces of feedback. When we released the draft plans, we took all that stuff, we met with people, we came ideas, we scouted out in the field. Here's our draft plan. We only got 105 comments. Okay, and then we just did the very specific proposal for phase 1, what we're doing next, which I'll tell you all about, and we got 2 comments. Now, I've been doing this about 15 years. I've worked for the BLM and the Park Service. That's a good graph. You want the graph to start with a lot of input here and then end with nobody who's mad at you. That's my public engagement 200 level college course. You want that, the graph going the other way. We've all been there, okay? Our graph went down. Okay, so anyways, the pieces we'll talk about in the trail plan, what we do is basically we have to run them through a process called the National Environmental Policy Act. Anytime the federal government disturbs the surface of the earth, essentially, we have to go through a process to make sure that we take into account cultural resources, endangered species, the effects on local communities. Okay, and so we will basically break up the trail plan in a few different phases and run it through that process. But we'll get into what we kind of chopped off the first phase. I think it's good because we want to get some things going on the ground, right? Okay, so I'm going to dive into the overall plan. I feel like it's important sometimes like share the good stuff, like what is happening, what's at the front end of this presentation, tell you what we're doing, and there's more slides, of course. The big one for you all is that this whole system, I mean, who has hiked in this sort of 50-year Golder Ranch area over here that we can almost see from this room? Okay, now some of you may or may not know that about half of that system lies on Arizona State Trust lands. Okay, oh, you all are very knowledgeable, I can tell. And then the other half lies on National Forest Service land. So when you go into those gates, like Middle Gate or those other gates, that's you going from state land to national forest land, okay? And so there were 18 miles of user-created trails that existed there, originally cow trails, typically. Equestrians and hikers and mountain bikers have found them. So one of the major decisions that the Forest Service had to make through this process was, what are we going to do with all these? It might seem obvious just to make them nice and adopt them, but there's a variety of factors at play, right? And we'll get into some of those specific to the system. But one of them is, I'll cut to the chase, we're going to adopt it and make it nice. We're going to make sure the trails that exist there are sustainable and usable and signed. We're going to try to make it into perpetuity that you can access them. I'll talk about that. That's not a guarantee. And we're going to build some new stuff to enable better loops and whatnot, and restore some existing loops that are there so that they're easier to follow. So that's really the headliner for your part of the world. These are the other things happening in phase 1 that we anticipate making a final formal, someone signs the line decision on in December, and that we'll begin a lot of this work in January. Okay, the other things is now we're moving around the corner. I imagine many of you have gone up to Mount Lemmon and hike around Mount Lemmon or hike around Sabino, so this is now going out of your neck of the woods. But there's a little existing trail at Molino Canyon from the hairpin turn. We're going to build a very nice beginner trail that goes up that canyon, because you'll hear about the issues. One of them is the trails around here are pretty steep. Not sure if you've noticed, but they're kind of steep. So we're looking for opportunities to broaden that spectrum of use, right? Okay, we're also going to build we are a little limited on parking up on the Catalina Highway, sometimes quite acutely so. So you'll hear one of the things is we're improving parking where it makes sense. This is not an indefinite exercise, but there's a few places that make sense to add some parking capacity. The other one I would say has probably been the most popular with hikers, and it's a little more difficult, but we have a plan to connect the Finger Rock and Pontotoc trails to make them a loop. That is outside of Sabino Canyon, the single busiest trail in the Catalinas. It gets sometimes 15, 17,000 hikers a month, and making a loop will slightly increase your sense of solitude while you're doing that very busy, popular thing. There's an many people don't, Milagrosa Trail, which is over on the other side of the basin. That was actually the same thing as Golder Ranch. Never an official trail, never an official Forest Service trail. Might not have known that. We're proposing to adopt that into the system. There's a little trail from the Sabino overflow lot that goes up to Esperero. If you're sneaky, you know about it. You don't got to be sneaky anymore. We're going to adopt that and reroute it, okay? A few other things less related to hiking. Oh, improving park. Anybody tried to park at Gordon Hirabayashi over the winter sometime? Not so great. We're going to reorient that so we have more day use parking there while still enabling equestrian trailers. There's a kind of a reconfiguration of that. There's some reroutes to some trails, Pima Canyon, some others, places where they're very steep or eroding. And there's some stuff with climbers. We'll just gloss over the climber part. It's a hiking crowd. There's enough to talk about. Okay, so we've been talking about recreation, but the context of this is that the Catalinas have a lot else going on. There's a lot of cultural and tribal significance to the Catalinas. There are 12 affiliated tribes from around Arizona who claim the Coronado National Forest as their ancestral and current homeland. And all of them in some way take a keen interest in what is going on in the Santa Catalinas. And the federal government has a trust responsibility to formally consult with those tribes. So it's really a significant cultural resource. And then there are site-specific places, petroglyphs and others around. Okay, wildlife habitat. A number of threatened and endangered species. Up top, it's mainly the Mexican spotted owl, which there's a lot of restrictions and considerations for. Farther down, obviously, we have the desert bighorn sheep, not a threatened or endangered species, but one that we certainly care about and have restrictions in place for. We think about 70 of those, give or take. They're awfully hard to count, actually. Very difficult to count. It's a working landscape. There are active ranchers. There's an active rancher that grazes the area where Golder Ranch is, the Goff family. Scientific research, the observatories on the top that you can sort of get a glimpse of from over here. That's a former Air Force base that's under permit authorization from the Forest Service. That is an interesting part of my job, if you might imagine, along with the Mount Graham International Observatory and Hopkins are all located on the Coronado National Forest. So there's a lot going on up there. The Ski Valley, Summer Haven, stuff around the bottom. It's, recreation is a dominant use, but it's certainly not the only use. Okay, so this will be short. I'm making it sound relatively simple. There's a lot of layers. There's so many layers to planning on federal lands. There's the Wilderness Act, right? There's the National Environmental Policy Act. There's National Historic Preservation Act. And all those are sort of summarized we have a forest plan that we recently redid in 2018 that guides everything that happens on the Coronado National Forest. It has a zoning system. What kind of recreation are we aiming for in this place versus that place? What can you do in wilderness? Can you build a new trail in wilderness? Those types of things provide a lot of sideboards to something on the level of what's going on in the Catalinas. So we won't dive too deeply into that, but this was not taken this monsoon, I can assure you. This is Pima Canyon. We all have our own favorites, right? I mean, the whole place is nice, but Pima Canyon is my personal. Don't tell the others. Okay, so just a quick summary. This is a picture up by Oracle as well. 250 miles, about half of the mileage in the trail system is actually in wilderness, like in Push Ridge Wilderness primarily. Mountain biking is a really growing use. Only about a quarter of all those trails, even though some of them are outside of wilderness, are like practically available for mountain biking, meaning they're too steep, rocky, difficult to actually ride a bike on. Not very many trails for motorized uses, almost none, and then unauthorized trails. So unauthorized trails are trails that the Forest Service does not recognize as official or maintain. Fortunately for us, people go online and post where they go all the time, so it's actually quite easy to count all these. Thank you to the public. 200 miles of those routes, so almost as much in the unofficial trail system as the official one, but only about 40 miles of those are very heavily used. Meaning some of those are routes that you would maybe be out in the desert and not even necessarily call a trail. But we had to decide, what do you do with all those, right? Okay, another cool thing, the Arizona National Scenic Trail. I'm sure people use that. What a wonderful thing. Designated 2009. A lot of it goes through the Catalinas. A ton, 53 miles of it. And then another 22 miles are that wilderness bypass, the route around the wilderness for equestrians and mountain bikers. So the Arizona Trail Association, who I'm sure you all are aware of and are engaged in, are a huge partner for us. That's Hutch's Pool. Okay, so real quick, who uses trails? So we did, obviously, as you might imagine, a whole information gathering effort to inform what to do with this cool resource. And I know that we're in Pinal County, so I apologize for this slide, but you're outnumbered. 63% of people in Pima County report using trails in the past 12 months. That's a lot of people, okay? And here's what they do. The majority of them hike, mountain bike, dirt bike, horses. We assume some people do all five. Trail users, 80% do non-motorized activities and 20% do motorized, like Charlevoix Gap Road right here down the road from you. So that's some context. And then what's up with the Forest Service? Why are we struggling? Why have we struggled for the past 20 years? Because frankly, we don't have a lot of resources. It's just the reality. It's not a complaint. It's just when we're having conversations with people about what we're going to build, we're going to have an honest dialogue about what we have, right? That's fair. We just have one full-time person to maintain those 250 miles of trail. Now we have a whole team of people, but a lot of them are cleaning restrooms and taking out trash. You know, that takes a lot of time and effort. We have I think 205 trash cans on the Santa Catalina Ranger District. Yes, our staff have counted to remind me, the administrator, of that on occasion. And across the whole system, 1,100 or so miles, we get about $50,000 a year from Congress to maintain it. Now, we do have some user fees, right? So you pay your trailhead. That we only collect about 40 grand from all the trailheads along the Catalina Highway. So it takes about $5,000 to $8,000 to maintain a mile of trail. So the math, it ain't great, but it's okay. We're going to work through that. See, the bottom part is that people volunteer a lot. And I'll talk elsewhere about our financial situation, how it's improving. But we did kind of a baseline of pre-pandemic because things got a little weird in there. We almost got $1 million of help on trails. About that every year, $800,000 to $1 million if you count labor at $27 an hour, and now it's higher. But that's the Santa Catalina Volunteer Patrol is included in that. A lot of this is focused on Sabino Canyon, as you might imagine. That welcomes a majority of the visitation. But 12,000 hours a year of people doing trail maintenance for us. That's part of the picture. I would also say there's a recently passed act. You're going to ask, how do you afford all this stuff that we're talking about here? Recently passed act in 2020 called the Great American Outdoors Act, which takes a portion of offshore oil drilling revenue and reinvests it in national parks and forests across the United States. That has provided a significant boost for us to tackle deferred trail maintenance. I would say I mentioned earlier, why did the Forest Service start all this thing? Partly the fire, partly all the people wanting it, but also the Great American Outdoors Act passed, and I knew that we were going to have the ability to follow through on the thing that we wrote. So we're going to do a lot of this stuff. I can't say all of it, but I know how much resources we're going to have. We're going to do quite a bit of it. But if I had wrote this in 2012, not so good. Other thing that's nice, I like to highlight the positives of people doing things. There are over 150 recreation residences up on Mount Lemmon. I don't know if you knew that, like Willow Canyon and all those. A lot of those are on National Forest land. They pay a fee to the National Forest. For 80 years, that money has gone back to the Treasury. Those group of people lobbied and said, I want you to spend that where my cabin is. So now a lot of that money is going to stay at the forest level and we can use it for trail maintenance. A not insignificant sum, I would say. So there is a long-term trail maintenance budget thanks to people lobbying their congressional representatives on where their fees go. Okay, so here was the engagement by the numbers. I mentioned this is just a snapshot of that interactive mappy thing. Did anybody ever look at that? Anybody in here to look at that while it was up? Okay, all right, thank you, I appreciate you. Yeah. So different colored dots meant different colored things. It would be like, what's working well? And you would drop like a purple dot and be like, hey, this little piece of trail got redone, I really like that, okay? And many people got involved. Over 70 organizations were engaged, all that. And really the top themes are people want more trails. People always want more trails. And bikers want trails for them. And then there's these places that are already trails that people want. That's That's a very fast summary of a kind of a long period of listening. And here's the top issues with the Catalinas. I've referenced a few of them so far. Lack of legal and public access. So we'll just talk about one in your backyard. The road, when Golder Ranch Road hits the end of pavement, right? And then you know it takes a left and it goes around and there's that corral. Some people are following me here. There's a corral and then it goes down to the power lines and dead ends into the forest. We all know that Arizona state trust lands, the purpose of state trust lands is to generate revenue for the school system, right? All that area could and eventually probably will be sold by the state of Arizona. There is nothing guaranteeing that that road will continue to exist. Or the 50-year trail. It's called the 50-year trail because it expires in 2038. So currently, past 2038, there's no guarantee of a road or a trail that goes to all of those, other than Charleau Gap Road, and between Charleau Gap Road and Catalina State Park, there is no permanent legal way for people to get from here to there. So that's an issue, okay? These other issues I think that we've talked about. So you would eventually see a sign like this of some nature, right? Even if state land sold one parcel of that, the new private owner of the parcel could decide that it's no longer available for public access. Okay, so we are trying to resolve that, but that's one of several issues. And like I said, I was jokingly talking about the trails being steep, but that's a major issue. Everyone in the community should have access to nature. You're right? It's just critical. It makes you healthy and it makes you a whole person, right? I'm very declarative about that, but it's my entire career, so I think that's fair. Everyone should be able to go out there. I often think, when you're taking somebody up to Mount Lemmon, like someone who's got like a little knee thing bothering them, where do you go with that person? The pie store. Where you got to burn calories before the pie store is my contention. Exactly. All you do is get a very large cookie or a pie. So we tried to fix that, and you'll see the ways that we tried to fix that. I would also say that outdoor recreation in general, but also specific to here, doesn't reflect the demographics of our community. There are people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds that, for a variety of reasons, are not using it as the same rate as some members of our community. And providing trails that are appealing to everyone is a part of helping close that gap as well. I think we've talked about a lot of it. A lot of rising mountain bike use, and in a few places that gets a little sticky. Aspen Draw, Bug Spring, the places that are really busy for mountain bikes, and they're gonna say, well, we can only ride 1 out of 5 trails. We're all gonna go to those trails. So that was an issue as well we wanted to solve. Anybody know where this is? Yeah. Windy Point. Windy Point. Okay, like I said, the main tension of the project is everybody, you say, hey, what do you guys want to see out there? It's like, honestly, any public service, right? Well, we'd like more and nicer stuff. It's reasonable. I'd like more trails that are nicer. Well, there's a little tension to that. We can do nicer or we can do more. It's hard to do both. Okay, so planning is all about trade-offs, balance, and priorities. So how did we resolve that? So here's the goals and objectives for the planners. Some projects are in here. Some people are like, I just want to see the maps and the projects. Some people want to hear what's the overall thing. So I'm trying to sprinkle them both in there for you. Okay, goals and objectives, the highlight. We have to get permanent legal access to the forest. That's pretty critical. So we got to get this road in here. I would say the other thing, anybody remember the Coronado Reserve proposal by Oracle? That was a large subdivision proposed. Anyways, the north end of the Charleau Gap Road is in a similar situation to Golder Ranch. There is a large private parcel that could be closed at any time. That's another place that we're trying to fix and have good progress on doing so. We believe that we can acquire that parcel. There's a similar issue at the bottom of Milagrosa Trail. If you've ever been to Milagrosa Trail, it goes through an HOA. You all are members of HOA. You know the HOA may change its mind potentially someday and not let people hike through there. Okay, second major is we're going to try to prevent parking issues by expanding capacity where it makes sense. So there's a few places just to highlight there. Has anybody stopped at Palisades Visitor Center for a long time? Probably not, because it's funny, even the Palisades Trail does not connect to the Palisades Visitor Center. That's strange. You can't make this up. Okay, so one of the things is there's a lot of parking there. It's a pretty flat spot. That's where all the scout camps and stuff are. There's only so many flat places on that thing. Kind of looks flat from down here, but not so much when you start looking for flat places to build things. So one of the ideas is to make Palisades itself more of a hub, to have more trails connect to it and have more parking there and improve the services that are there to take some of the pressure off the aforementioned pies and cookies. Because Summer Haven is a very busy place and it's a cul-de-sac, and if people were given other options, I think a fair number of people would take the first exit, right? Okay, so also I mentioned the Molino parking expansion and a couple other places. Okay, so the other one is get the Arizona National Scenic Trail off of roads. So the Arizona National Scenic Trail in the legislation said this is not a thing on roads. This is a trail. But still large portions of it go on roads because that was a little bit easier to pick those back in the day. One of them goes through private land, a mining company owns on Oracle Ridge. So we have to find a way around that. And so actually we've decided to move what is the Arizona National Scenic Trail will now be, instead of Oracle Ridge, it'll be Red Ridge and Catalina Camp, and then the rest of Oracle Ridge. That's a big change. Means you have to go down before you go up, but if you've been on the Arizona Trail, there's some downs and ups. Okay, some of the areas are so rugged that you really couldn't build a trail without very invasive methods, you know. Okay, and we want to boost volunteer and partnership stewardship as well. So be better at recruitment, be better at incentives, be better at recognition as well. Oh, another thing, Arizona National Scenic Trail, there's these little bullets and you're like, someday that'll make your life better. Okay, you know when you go to Marshall Gulch and there's all those people like walking on the road and they go, watch out. Well, we're going to have a trail from Summer Haven to the Marshall Gulch Trail so that, and not everybody will use it, but it will take some traffic off and many people can just hike directly from Summer Haven into Marshall Gulch into the National Forest. So that's only like a 0.9 mile trail, but that's really popular stuff there. And now there's a Beyond Bread up there. So it's not just pies. I mean, I guess it's more pies, but you get the point. Okay, so I mentioned the main tension of the project. People want more and better stuff. Okay, so here's kind of the hard part. Rubber meets the road a little bit. A lot of the system is extremely remote. And the more remote a trail is, the more difficult it is to maintain. And you could say, well, there's volunteers. It's very difficult to carry tools 4 miles in, work for 4 hours, and go 4 miles out. Now we have some of the Tucson trail runners, I would say, Box Camp and Palisades Trail. If you've been on those trails, those are very difficult. They are jogging into those places to trim them and out. There's only so many of those people out there, I'll tell you that. Okay, so we have to, if we're going to add trails, we have to get rid of some trails. That's not the most popular concept, okay? But we sat down with all the groups and said, we want a 10% growth type thing, a cap and trade system, sort of, is what evolved, right? And if you propose something new, we have to think about what we're not going to maintain anymore. And it doesn't mean we would prohibit you to remove something from the National Forest System. Doesn't mean it's closed or you're not allowed to use it. It just means we're not going to put it on maps and we're not going to promise to maintain it. It's not going to be maintained. You can still go down that thing that exists, but it's not going to get our maintenance, okay? And so you remove some trails from the system. Some of them are not controversial at all. Like, has anyone even heard of Evans Mountain? It's very far. It's in the northeast thing. Maybe you've done it a long time ago, but it's 5 miles. We're not going to maintain that. So you're going to remove some from the system. You're going to adopt some popular stuff. Milagrosa and Golder Ranch right here, those are really popular, right? So we adopted somewhere in the range of 25 miles, 10%. So basically we removed 10% of the system, we adopted 10%, and then we're going to build 10% more to grow the system by 10%. And we think we can maintain that. That's more or less the crux of the thing. Of the overall plan and idea of it is that we can grow 10%. And then once you have that framework that you negotiate with your partners, you say, well, what fits within that, right? So we'll get to that. It's not a great idea to get rid of this trail that's very hard to maintain and then in its place build another very hard to maintain thing that people don't use. We want trails for everybody. And I understand that, one of the trails that we got rid of, for example, is Cañada del Oro. That was it was a popular trail among some people. I backpacked it myself before the fire, but it was very heavily burned. To bring that back would have consumed all of our resources that we had. So we said, we're going to let that go. Maybe in 15 years we revisit that, but that trail is not going to be part of the National Forest System anymore. And in exchange, we get 5 miles that we can build or adopt that are close to people. That's essentially what we're doing. We're going to let some things that go. Also, there are natural resource benefits to letting some areas be for wildlife, and we're going to build stuff that's closer to people. I sort of liken it to the rural post office versus the post office in the center of town thing, to be honest. And the rural post office is still very important. I've lived in rural communities. It's very important. So you got to pick the right rural post offices to combine or to get rid of, is what I would say. And we've tried very hard to do that. So I'm summarizing that thing. Also, there's some places where building a trail is useful. You'll hear one of them as a fuel break in case there's a fire. So in some places, you can build a trail and say, hey, if there's a fire, you could stop it right there. So there's some other things to think about, right? There's some other, or like the trails that are for public safety, like the one from Marshall Gulch to Summerhaven. I mean, honestly, if you save one person's even severe injury over the next 20 years by building that trail, that makes it worth it, right? Okay, so we'll talk about trails and what you'll see that are different. So I've just broken up just by user group, and we'll spend less time on the other user groups. But so yeah, create safe alternatives to walking on roads. There's another one that I should have mentioned. You know, the parking lot at the same issue at Marshall Gulch as at Rose Canyon Lake. When you drive it, people are just like walking that road. Okay, a lot of people are just trying to get to the lake. So what we're proposing is to expand the parking that's at the top of Rose Canyon Lake Road, because there's a kind of a flat area there anyways. And we would build a trail directly from there straight to the lake. That'll be nice, I think. Marshall Gulch to Summerhaven, and then this Oracle Ridge thing to try to get people around that mine. Okay, easier welcoming trails. We're going to highlight each one of these. The highlights are Tucson Vista. So you'll see Tucson Vista is along with a couple mountain biking trails, and Golder Ranch is like the marquee project of the trail plan. Tucson Vista is a trail that will parallel Catalina Highway from Rose Canyon Lake all the way to Sunset at a sustainable grade. It's an 8.5-mile trail that will enable loops and just be a very nice, beautiful trail to walk that's built for hiking rather than being the way to get to a fire lookout in 1935. It'll be nice. Tanque Verde Falls. Who's been to Tanque Verde Falls? Okay, previously, after this, you should go. Okay, so previously approved project back in 2020, but it was rolled into the trail plan. Tanque Verde Falls is a beautiful, very, very popular place, visited by about 80,000 visitors a year. And people sort of just go down into the canyon to see the waterfall. We're going to build a nice 2-mile loop that includes a waterfall overlook. Because there's a public safety issue. Back in the 80s, 17 people died because they were in the canyon trying to see the waterfall during the monsoons, right? So if the only way to see the waterfall is to be at the base of the waterfall, that's not great. And so we're proposing, I've already built half of it, a loop there and improved parking there, because Tanque Verde Falls is we allow camping there now, and it's a social environment that not everyone finds very welcoming. So we're going to prohibit camping and turn it more into a day-use trail area. And that project is actually fully funded and is going to start this fall. Loop opportunity, that Finger Rock to Pontotoc thing I think is pretty cool. If you ever hike Finger Rock or Pontotoc, you'll know that's, if you just built, and you look up at it, you're like, how can you build a trail there? But you can. We've scouted it. It's about a mile connector between those to make like a 4.5-mile loop. Okay, and then we'll talk more about this Golder Ranch thing and what that actually looks like. Okay, mountain biking. Golder Ranch itself is quite popular for mountain biking. We adopted that, that's part of it. And then in a couple places we decided to build mountain biking specific trails. They're built differently and they're directional. You ride up somewhere and you go down somewhere, so that mountain bike use will be concentrated in those places. And we picked places that are pretty close to the road, so there's lower environmental impact and they're easier to maintain. That actually received quite a bit more support from the other user groups than I would have imagined. Okay, we'll skip those for now. Okay, implementation outlook. So what is going to happen here? Like when is all this cool stuff happen? Because there's 40 projects. If you look at this, there's 40 projects. You know, like, yes, we have resources now, but there's only so much we can do. So the first phase, and I can go back and refresh you on what's in the first phase, is that is going to be approved here probably in December. And that's approved after we do a number of things. You do formal consultation with Native American tribes, you survey the trails for cultural resources, you consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service to make sure there's no impacts to any rare critters. And you have your hydrologist and all your range people say there's no problems with these, essentially. Okay, and we think that we're going to start all this in January. So some things have already been approved. There's a big plan to redo Marshall Gulch. There's a big thing to add a parking lot in Summer Haven, and there's that big Tanque Verde Falls project I mentioned. All those things have already gone through this review process and are funded and will occur. Okay, and then the second set of things that is about to be approved is the one I just shared. It's a little complicated, but you get it. We're going to have a kickoff event, we think, in January, if the government is still operating. In January, we're going to have a kickoff event to welcome stewards to come work on this new system. And we're probably going to use, we have a foundation, the National Forest Foundation, and they have a wonderful gentleman who's a contractor that runs these events and does an outstanding job. His name's Eric Rulliancich, really nice guy. And then again, I mentioned this mix, this Great American Outdoors Act is a big deal. On Monday, we are using that special pot of infrastructure money to hire the first Coronado Trail crew, a 5-person crew, the first Coronado Trail crew since 2006. So we have 5 young people on Monday reporting to work at Sabino Canyon. You can imagine there's a fair bit for them to do. So, and they will be with us through the end of April. And then yes, big volunteer components. We'll use the fees people spend at trailheads to go into this. We use some Sabino Canyon money elsewhere. That's part of the deal. And the National Forest Foundation does fundraising for us as well. So even after the Bighorn, the National Forest Foundation did a big fundraiser. We partnered with Visit Tucson. We did a big thing, and we raised $40,000, $50,000 out of that. And then they go get grants, and altogether they've helped raise about $250,000 for us to do some of these things. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the projects. I guess I'll pause here for any. That's a lot of information. Questions on the how and the what of the thing before I get. Usually the cool part is people want to see about, like, tell me more about that trail. So that's the next phase, is more detail on the trails. But about the what and the how. Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
What's the condition of the Romero Pools Trail to the pass?
Yeah, so that was probably the most impacted trail on the whole range by the Bighorn Fire. Because if you remember, that's kind of, that's where the thing went up, right? So we spent countless hours of people time in there. It is 100%, it was not usable for a time, and it was closed, as you might remember. It was a year, yeah. Well, it's taken probably 20 weeks of 5 people working every day to restore it because of how remote and difficult it is to get to. So we have another crew in there actually this month to clean it up, but it is now, as I understand, totally usable. The other trails that were really, some trails didn't get hurt as bad as you'd think. Wilderness of Rocks didn't get burned that bad. The upper parts of Pima and Finger Rock and Romero were the ones that have really given us a lot of trouble, and we've invested a lot of time and energy, and Esperero in bringing all those back. So really, I should mention that while we're doing all this planning, the past 2 years we've spent several $100,000 of disaster recovery money and other things to try to bring back the trail system that was never in doubt anyways, to try to get Romero usable again. Butterfly, oh goodness, Butterfly. Butterfly is like the most, it's like our little Costa Rica. It's just like, why? It's so much plants, it's impossible. So we have invested for a couple years a lot of time, like it's been like Bighorn Fire recovery, just 2 full years of just countless people hours just to get the thing usable again. And we're kind of starting to turn the corner towards making things nicer and better. I should have highlighted that earlier. We kind of want to say, hey, we're not just spinning our wheels here while we have problems. Like, we're spending time and money of the thing we know is a big issue. So thank you for the question.
Is the January event open to the public?
It is open to the public. Oh, the question was, is the Romero Canyon Trail available? What's the condition of it above Romero Pools? That was the question, and my winding answer. January 20th and 21st will be the weekend. We honestly will probably have to cap the event just because you really need to have like someone who knows what they're doing, overseeing small groups of 4 or 5 people. We could probably get 100 people or 150 people out to that. So we'll have some sort of registration system set up of, we think an event of 40 or 50 people makes sense. And the equestrians said they'll pack in treats. They said, we're not so much trail workers anymore, but we do treats, cold beverages.
They can trim higher branches.
They can, yes. Bev Showalter with County Line Riders was the chief collaborator here. Other questions on the how and the what? Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to say last April, I went on a hike up Pima Canyon. I started following ribbons. It was a complete disaster. I then decided to go up Mount Kimball by Finger Rock, and I met a lady coming down. I said, it's only 7:30 in the morning. Where are you coming from? From Pima Canyon. Really, it's open. Oh, it's a beautiful trail. So then the next week, I went up that trail, and I want to compliment you people, the volunteer crew. That trail was awesome.
Oh, great.
What they did between the first time they scouted it out and the second was night and day.
Wonderful.
Absolutely phenomenal work, and I really was appreciative. Another trail I tried was the Nagi Trail.
Yeah.
And that, like the butterfly, any plan to just quit on it?
We're gonna shorten it. There's the Davis Spring Nagy Loop
Yeah.
is very, very difficult. We did have a small number of people who were like avid, wanted to improve that. We're gonna improve part of it, and then actually try to make them a loop that's a little bit closer that can be maintained. There actually is a volunteer event this month on Nagy Trail with the national. Yeah, we're trying to do about an event a month or two. Yeah, the first part of it's pretty good. It starts to get really almost impossible the lower you go.
And then last week, you mentioned Palisade and
Yeah.
at Box Camp. I just scouted a hike out down to East Fork and come back, which is a good 15 miles.
Oh yeah, intense.
I was very impressed. The opera had nice blue ribbons to help me follow the
Oh, great.
Box Camp down. And then the lower portion, the treadway was good, so I was able to follow it all the way to East Fork. So I was pleased.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's one of those that we're investing some time, and then the trail runners said we'll take that one. So that's nice. Okay, you guys want to go into the individual projects real quick, and then I'm close to my time here. Okay, this is the Tucson Vista Trail I mentioned. Someone told me it sounded like a subdivision, but I'll take it. I almost changed the name, but I like it. I like it because it's very, trails should communicate what they are. And I think once this is built, this will be a marquee place in our community. So this again goes, the core part of it, the first part we'll do goes from, there's a small cabin called Soller's Cabin. It will go connect to Palisades. It'll then connect all the campgrounds that are up there, Showers Point and Spencer Canyon and so on, and then go over to the existing Sunset Trailhead that we're also going to improve and enlarge. So this is like the little bit wider, nice trail for everyone. I mean, it will involve some up and down, but it will not be steep, and we will build it to last. There's some sections of old road that we can repurpose, but it's 8.5 miles. Okay. Also, it will connect, I didn't put a slide up here for this project, but around Mount Bigelow, the road, Bear Wallow and Mount Bigelow, we've also developed a number of other trails so that you could make a big loop on the top of the mountain. It's difficult to cross the highway, obviously. There are some culverts and ways under in a few places, but we tried not to create more problems, right? And people do cross, and there's some dedicated crossings, but anyways, that was a limiting factor. But this is, I think, a wonderful project. This is a spotted owl habitat, so I'll have to go through the process to permit this and get approval for it. Okay, I think I've touched on this. Here's sort of the map. It's going to be hard to see for everybody, but and I've learned everyone has different names for these trails. Wow, that was kind of funny at these meetings. People were like, that's dynamite, or that's rattlesnake, or that's whatever. You call it hidden canyon. Okay, well, there's about to be some official signs out there, so you guys can keep calling it what you want, but the Forest Service is going to call it something. Okay, so this is like Middlegate Trail. this is that road I mentioned. This is the end of it gets very steep. You wouldn't have driven this last part. The 50-year trail is over here on state lands, and it goes all the way to here, and this is called Upper 50-year Trail. There's a number of, one of the gates is here, one of the gates is here, one of the gates is here. This is called Middle Gate, even though it's the lowest gate.
What we call North Gate, the one that goes into Catalina.
Yes, the confusion is real, even by me. So all that we do hope to have nice, like, Sweetwater, Pima Canyon style trailhead maps at a lot of the junctions. But one of the big things we're doing is also building a new trail at the boundary here that's going to connect some of this, like what's called do you call it Baby Jesus? We're going to rename it because we don't use religious terminology on federal lands, but from that all the way up to Upper 50-year. So in the case that this 50-year trail went away, we would have a duplicate. And then this is very beautiful. This is like just on the other side of Sutherland with all the big boulders. And this will enable another set of loops, okay? And then all these little purple parts are reroutes of current trails that are not how if you built them from scratch, you wouldn't build it this way. So this is gonna actually be really nice. This is, if some people call it cow pies and baby Jesus, that we're gonna rename that as Stone Cactus Loop. That's gonna be the Stone Cactus Loop. Yes, then there's a wooden trough, up in the middle there, yeah. So this is about a 5.5-mile trail that I think will be quite popular. And the rest of it actually is okay, because a lot of it's on rock, so that's kind of a benefit here. So in total, this is gonna be about 18 miles on the forest. Somehow we'll improve parking here at the end. We are, like I mentioned, we are actively seeking a permanent easement from the Arizona State Land Department to get there so that access will be protected forever. Don't know whether that will occur. Yes?
What are you doing with the petroglyphs?
So the petroglyph area, one of the requirements of the project was that we kept a certain distance from the Sutherland Wash Rock Art District. So that was key from the start, that we had no intention of building or adopting any trails that go through the Rock Art District. And every one of these trails that we're either building or adopting has to be surveyed by an archaeologist on our team to make sure that it doesn't pose any risk to cultural resources. And we knew going in that there might be a number of changes. You might have to drop one of these altogether. So far, we actually, in this part of the system, have not found any additional resources yes, I'm actually a little bit surprised. But we did have concern at the original, what's our protection of the Rock Art District? And I shared earlier, even my first working name of this was to call it the Sutherland Wash Rock Art, or the Sutherland Wash Trail System. And our archaeologist wisely counseled me to name it, just keep it Golder Ranch so that there's not even any mixing of those two as places. And we have a site steward program with the Arizona State Parks. I mean, essentially the Forest Service has allowed this to occur for about 30, 40, 50 years. And at some point, the proliferation of trails, in our estimation, posed a greater risk to the cultural resources there than adopting it and managing it. And that time was now. And I think that's the right decision. We'll see. Joe?
Adam, will you fix the road going in if we get the easement?
If we get the easement, yes. No use fixing up the rental, right? You own it. Why fix it?
So that's 642?
Yeah, 642. And this is feels trail-like and is used by a lot of equestrians. And the really confusing part is they call this Baby Jesus. And it took me 2 meetings to figure that out. I was like, anyways, there will be an official map. It's going to take some time for there to be official map and maps out there. We think that fixing up the core part of the system, that's like the winter, spring. That trail crew I mentioned is going to be out here for 3 weeks prior to the event. We're going to have other crews stationed here, and then we'll kind of slowly work our way out. I wouldn't expect this all to get fixed until next fall. But what's nice about this is that these are all little reroutes, and you can kind of just keep chipping away at them. So if this trail keeps changing over time, you're not losing it, okay? That's actually happening. The trail is going to be a little different every time. It's going to evolve as we complete these little reroutes. Any other questions about this project? It's definitely in your backyard. Yes?
I have a question. Is the Forest Service reluctant to use eminent domain to maintain?
Yes.
Or to get access? Why is that?
Well, I mean, in this case, Yeah, federal agencies used eminent domain for quite a period of time to great outcry, I think legitimately. But in this case, this is state land. It was actually given to the state of Arizona at statehood. There's 9 million acres of it in the state of Arizona. Like, this is already something that's been given by the United States to the state of Arizona in 1912. So.
A follow-on question to the road going in. How long do you think it will take for you to negotiate the easement? And will you start the trail once you fully have the easement?
Yeah, we agonized over that. Yeah, that was hard to say, well, are you going to start this before you know you have that? Do you start? I don't have a good analogy. I was thinking of one, but it was going to lead us astray. So, yes, we're going to. I mean, the 50-year trail lasts until 2038. Okay, so we get 15 more years regardless. Yeah, like without any negotiation, there's 15 years. There's also a way to build, it's more expensive, but to build from Catalina State Park direct into this, okay? Now that really decreases the utility of the system if you have to hike a long ways or bike to get to this. But at the end of the day, you know, the iron's hot. And sometimes you just got to do it. And it's possible in 15 years, when I'm still working in this field, that I go, wow, we spent some energy on that and never were able to negotiate the roads easement. I'll be honest, that's a risk. I mean, they don't have any immediate plans to sell it either, you know. And you can have a state land recreational permit, as the club holds, I believe, to access this. There will always be that option. I mean, we want a road to the boundary that anyone can drive. But absent that, there's still a lot of utility to the system. And I would say one thing about sort of our conundrum with cost and maintenance is that the trails that are in the low desert are fundamentally cheaper and easier to maintain than trails. Like Upper Romero Canyon is grassy and woodsy and very difficult, and taking down big trees is hard. You know, a place like Golder Ranch, you know, can largely be maintained by volunteers. Some places kind of self-maintained by use if it's popular. So the risk reward made sense. But yes, I could tell you, we actually asked the community about that very thing. And I don't know how long it will take. The state is often reluctant to give these because in their view, it complicates the potential sale of the property in the future. Other questions about this? You can tell I'm trying to be pretty transparent about. Okay, other projects real quick. I didn't talk too much about this and I think I'm out of time, but the summit of the mountain is a pet peeve of mine. There's stuff everywhere, there's fences, there's metal. It's not befitting the summit of our mountain. And we have a variety of plans to fix and improve that, and also build an interpretive trail that would recognize the indigenous heritage of the Catalinas, among other things. Finger Rock Pontotoc Connector, I think I've touched on that, and then I'm done. Yes, sir.
Adam, a few slides back, you had a picture of a bicycle, and it had the word Bug Junior.
Oh, yeah.
What is Bug Junior?
Where was it here?
Right there.
Yeah, Bug Junior is one of those directional mountain bike specific trails that we have proposed.
Is that on Bug Spring?
It would be an alternative or go between Bug Spring and the highway. And part of the hope would be that if you build a trail specifically for mountain biking, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's extremely fun. If you do it on purpose, you know, you are building you can do things that you wouldn't be able to do normally, right? Oh, that thing is in the perfect spot and everything just flows right. So when you build those, they do tend to be a magnet for mountain bikers. And so we can't promise that's gonna mean less conflict between hikers and mountain bikers on Bug Spring, for instance, but that is part of the idea, right, is to concentrate that use in one spot. And so Bug Junior.
So there's only about 10 spots thereabouts, less than a dozen spots in the parking lot for Bug Spring. Are you going to enhance that as well?
Yeah, that's the Hirabayashi project, because bikers will park at either Molino or Hirabayashi and then ride up, right? So those two areas will be essentially we're just moving the camping at Hirabayashi back to the back of the rec site, and that the areas that are currently used for camping, we're going to turn into day use parking. And actually with like no money whatsoever, that gets us like 30 parking spaces. Because to build 30 brand new parking spaces is like a couple $1,000,000. So we're just kind of moving the signs. Our staff, it's our favorite project. Internally, like my buddy who worked, my colleague, my friend Jake Beckley, who runs the Santa Catalina, he is the most excited about changing Hirabayashi so that 30 more people can park here. I'm into Vista myself, but it's to each is their own. Any other questions? I think there's. We do have some reroutes in mind for lower incinerator. Yes, it's very steep and almost scary to use. So we do have a map. It's not in the first phase because there's owls there and it takes a while to survey for owls and whatnot. But yes, that's an egregious place. And some parts of Upper Finger Rock, as were mentioned, are also another egregious place that's going to be rerouted. That actually is part of phase 1. So yeah, the mountain's steep. You're not going to fix every steep part of trail, but some of those where you're like, this is just really an issue and a safety issue and it's eroding. I would say there's about a dozen of those places that we'll try to fix over time. Yeah.
Anything else for Adam?
Last plug, not in the Catalinas. On December 15th, we're going to celebrate the completion of an over 30-mile reroute of the Arizona National Scenic Trail off of roads in the Patagonia area. So the trail down there went on roads for all these years, and we worked with the Arizona Trail Association to build 32 miles of new trails in the foothills of the Santa Ritas and Canelo Hills, and it's available, it's beautiful, and we're going to be celebrating that at a beer and wine garden in Patagonia on Friday evening, the 15th of December. That's my last plug.